Okay, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. You're listening to Today Islam, and we're broadcasting almost live all the way from the island of Curacao, just north of Venezuela. We're in the Caribbean, and to say the least, it's quite amazing and a lot of fun while we're here. We've met something more than just a nice island with the swaying trees in the breeze. Qatar is very famous for loving this breeze here. But we met something else. We met some beautiful Muslims, and then we found that the people all over the island, you know what, they have a beautiful heart. And we like that. It made you feel good, you know, just anybody you stop and ask them any question, that was very warm and open. And having spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C. and in New York, you can imagine the contrast. When, I don't even want to go into what you would expect if you ask somebody in New York where to go, they'll tell you very quick. In any case, we'll move forward. We want to today talk about an important subject, and that subject is God. Because no religion is complete without God. But for those who believe in God, they need to realize that they have a big enemy. A common enemy for all those who believe is the one who disbelieves. The one who would take people away from belief. And we call him the devil in English, or Diablo in Spanish, Iblis in the Arabic language. Same character, same guy, no difference. So let's first begin with that subject rather than to talk about a specific religion. Is there a God, and how can we know? Islam is based on truth and proof. Over 10 years ago, when I was preaching Christianity, I met a gentleman who was a Muslim from Egypt. I felt it was my duty to convert him to Christianity. And I tried my best. And look what he told me one day. He said, you know, if your religion is better than my religion, I'm willing to accept it. I said, well, that's pretty good. This boy's ready to go. He said, there's only one condition. I said, what's that? He said, you will have to have proof. I said, what? Proof? Proof? Religion is not based on proof. Religion is based on faith. And if you have faith, you don't need any proof. Right? He said, wrong. He said, in my religion, Islam, we have both proof and faith. We prove and then we believe. I was pretty curious to know how you could prove that. After all, he's going to try to prove to me that there's a God. Well, I believe, but still, what's the proof? And these are some of the things that we'll be talking about tonight. So I'll begin with the name of Allah, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, and begin to tell you what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God Almighty, has told us about His creation. He told us in His book that He's the one. Huwa alladhi, He is the one. He created samawati wal ard, the heavens and the earth, in sittul yawm, 6 periods of time or days. Thumma, and then astawa ala al-arsh, and then He rose above His throne. So this may be similar to what you already believe, but this is in the Holy Quran. And suppose that a child would look up to the stars in heaven one night and say to his daddy, Daddy, where did all this come from? It's a good question. When we think about the universe and all of its magnificence, it's easy to become overwhelmed at the design and the organization we see. And scientists have been studying the universe most recently with the help of what they call the Hubble telescope. And now they tell us that there are more than 250 billion galaxies. You know how many zeros it takes to make a billion?
Yes.
You must write a lot of big checks. And each one of these galaxies contains about 300 billion stars. So can you imagine 300 billion times 250 billion? Do you know how many zeros that is? A bunch. Yeah. I tried to figure it out, and it came up with something like 12 zeros, and I didn't know what to say except whoops. It's 75 something. What? I don't know, but a whole bunch of zeros. And imagine, anybody can observe and recognize that these solar systems are operating within specific laws, and they are in a particular order. And so the only conclusion that you can come to while you're looking at these stars, and looking at the galaxy, looking at the universe, you have to conclude that there's some kind of plan or a design and a balance to every part of the universe. That same child might look at a picture of the earth on the wall or a globe on the teacher's desk and then ask, well, where did the earth come from? How did the earth get here? Another good question. You see, our earth is only a tiny part of the universe, yet it is unlike any other planet. Did you know that? It is a perfectly designed system for life, especially human life. We can live here very easily, but we've yet to discover another planet on Earth like the Earth. Another planet like the Earth they haven't discovered. Nowhere throughout the universe have they even found life or even water. Oh, they're trying, but in the meantime, I'm going to just stay right here if it's all the same to everybody else. So think about it. Where did this Earth come from? How did it get here? Who designed this? Who put this system together? Who created life in the first place? And these are the questions we should ask before we ever start talking about religion. We should find out, is there a God? And if there is, who is this God? And then find out what is our purpose for being here. Because if we haven't done that, we don't have any business asking somebody about what their religion's all about or what day they worship. Doesn't really make sense. And again, think. What about life itself? Where did the human life come from? Where do plants and animals come from? Suppose a child asked that question. What would we tell them? Well, I'd like to reflect on something. That if you see an automobile go down the street, you do not have to see the place that manufactured the automobile to know that it's a car, do you? Do you have to go watch them make it before you'll get in and drive it? No, of course not. Do you have to see a chef prepare the food before you eat it? No, they set it on the table, you assume it's food, you eat it. Yes? A map on the wall. You don't say, that's not a map, I didn't see anybody draw it. A painting. You say, I don't see anybody standing there with a brush and the palette and the little tam on the side of the head, so I don't believe that's a painting. It's just a bunch of stuff fell on that paper. You wouldn't believe that. So how could you look at the universe when you look up into the sky and your eyesight doesn't even come back and you can't imagine who created such a thing? And you can look at yourself and realize, hey, this is a pretty amazing body I got here. I'm not talking about being on the beach. I'm talking about... This is not bikini night here. What I'm talking about is that suppose you cut yourself. If you cut the body, if you get a cut on there, how does it heal? How does that know how to come back together? The pieces come back together and heal, and in a few days you just have a mark, and a month later, just a little look, maybe some mark, and then a year later somebody asks you, you got cut pretty bad last year. You say, oh, I don't even remember where it was. People get burned on their fingertips. And if the first layer is burnt, it can grow back and the same fingerprints come back. How does this happen? How? Is there some memory chip in there? And if it is, who put it there? How many times have you been sick and you knew you were going to get well anyway, eventually? How did you know you would get well? What is that? What's curing you? And look at what some scientists have tried to say. They've tried to say that everything came out of a boom, a big bang. A big bang. Now that's a theory that they have, and it's called the Big Bang Theory. Theory means what? No proof. It's an idea. But more people today have accepted that theory than they have accepted the fact that there is a God. Why? I won't be able to give you a lot of details on all the subjects tonight, but I would tell you this. We have a website where we've gone into detail on over 2,000 subjects like this. You're welcome to visit the website, and we've linked to over 8,000 more, or 7,000 more, for a total of around 9,000 different links that you can visit through our website. It's called todayislam.com. It's in English, and I'm sorry I'm not able to speak the local language here, which you call Papiamento. I can't say much, except what? Donkey. But I have to be careful, it's going to come out MR, donkey. Sorry about that. But the main thing that we want to think about is that for sure the scientists have some motivation. Somebody's funding that. Somebody's putting a lot of money into these scientific activities and their research to keep people believing that everything came out of a big boom, by accident, by chance. There's no God. And not only that, something very despicable is to say that a human being came out of a monkey. You say, well, what's wrong with saying something like that? I'll tell you why. Because that's exactly where racism will come from. That is exactly where people who have lighter colored skin will look at people with darker colored skin and say, you still haven't evolved. And that's what they did. At the time of Darwin, which was about 1859, people didn't have the ability to research and know the things that we know in science today. But the scientists have been able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that what he theorized didn't work at all. Let me just touch on one of his issues and then you can see. When now keep in mind, he's a person from London where they hardly ever get any sunshine. And when they do, it's full of water, because it rains a lot over there. The man never went anywhere, and he was an amateur naturalist, and he went around to the Galapagos Islands. While he was visiting from island to island, he noticed that the birds on the different islands had different shaped, what do you call it? Pico de gallo? Beaks. Some were pointy, and some were flat, and some were shaped with a curve so they could eat fruit. Each one of them had their beak adjusted to the environment that they lived in, and so he thought that that was some stage of evolution. But he forgot to take into consideration all these birds are alive at the same time. Whoops. Well, remember, he was only an amateur. And not only that, consider this as well. In 1998, in October, in our hometown of San Antonio, Texas, on the PBS channel, Public Broadcasting Service, they had a special talking about the weather phenomenon known as El Nino. And in this weather phenomenon, they give a long explanation of how it works and where it comes from and what it does to the environment. Just in passing, they said, the announcer said, it would be funny for Darwin to be here today to realize what just happened in the Galapagos Islands. He said whenever the El Nino came through, it changed the environment, it changed the way the plants were. Within 6 months, it was totally different on those islands. He said, and guess what? When the eggs hatched, the beaks of the birds were different so that they could eat what was there. If that's evolution, that's pretty fast, isn't it? Who did that? So there are many proofs. And then we can look at our own lives day after day after day and see how many times we've asked for something and it came back to us. How did we get this? We asked something to happen and it happened. How did that happen? You wanted somebody's phone number and then they just called you out of the clear blue. How does that come about? And if you say random chance, I want you to stop and think. That's just like saying the universe is a random chance. Is there such a thing as a random chance? I invite you to consider two things. First of all, take a water glass and walk outside to the cement and drop it. And see what happens to it. What will happen? That water glass, we'll take the water out first, I'll drink it. Then take it out there and drop it. What will happen? In a lot of little pieces? Or will it fall down and make 6 little tiny glasses, and they're all filled up with tea? Will it happen? Never. How many would you drop out here before they'll break and fall into just exactly 6 little glasses with nothing left over? What's the random chance? 0. Here's another one for you. A tornado comes through a junkyard, okay? And it whips around in the junkyard, and as it leaves, what's sitting behind is a brand new car sitting there with a motor running. And you're laughing at something that small, but you can look at the universe and say there's no God. La ilaha illallah. It's impossible. The only conclusion you have to say, there must be a God. There has to be a God. Because otherwise, how did we get our brain? And if you said, well, because this is part of evolution, because people used to be knuckle draggers walking like this, didn't have any smarts. But then over time they got smarter, the next group got smarter and smarter. Now I'm going to ask you a question. When you look back and see what the Romans were capable of doing 2,000 years ago, and what the Egyptians were capable of doing 5,000 years ago, and what the people of Iraq and Balad Hashem were capable of doing 10,000 years ago, and what the Chinese were capable of doing 15,000 years ago, and then look at us today and wonder why we're in such a bad shape. We can put a person on the moon, but we can't even be nice to our neighbor. Ask yourself if we're progressing. Are we? And I think not. The human being has a gift of intellect. It has another gift, a gift of emotion, heart. We're smart, we can figure things out, but sometimes we can override that smartness. Let me give you an example of that. Suppose we were to take a starving animal, like a dog or a cat, starving, and we put fresh meat in a bowl and set it in the middle of the room and then turn the animal loose. What will they do? You say, what's the question here? There's no question. The food's gone and so is the animal, right? Of course. That's what they will do. Will you do it 100 times? Will you eat it 100 times? Yes. 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, it will always be yes. Because hungry animals eat food. That's what they do. But a human being, when you had children and you saw them hungry and you had food in front of you, but you preferred for your children, so you starved. You could have eaten the food, but you didn't. You gave it to them. Why? Because your heart overrode your mentality. Where did that heart come from? And what we know in Islam, it comes from God. That emotion that you have, the compassion that you have, the concern that you have, the love that you have in your heart comes from where? God gives it to you. And in Islam, we know that God sent down His rahmah, His grace, His mercy to all the human beings for all time. And He sent down this and all the love and the mercy that there exists for all of the mothers for their children is all a part of this mercy, and it's only one part of His mercy. He has 100 parts of this kind of mercy, and this is only one out of 100. And the other 99 parts of mercy, the grace, He's saving for the believers on the day of judgment. And that's an amazing thing to think about. How can we believe less than that? There must be a God. Where does it come from? We have to admit that. So we've talked about this. I want to ask now, who is this God? Who is this Creator? That's an important question, and it needs a real answer. The answers that we come with have got to be testable. The answers have to be testable. You have to test it. You cannot just say, oh, I heard somebody say, and then just take that. That's not proof. It's not really faith. It's kind of stupid. It's kind of stupid to think that you would just take it. Somebody told you, just do it, no problem. If you're driving down the street and you say, well, I don't know what to do here. There's a big red light in front of me. Maybe I should stop. Nah, don't worry about it. Just drive through it. Well, but I heard that if you drive through a red light, you'll be in big trouble. Nah, don't worry about it. Well, could you give me some reassurance? Sure, I told you don't worry about it. What more do you want than that? Duh. What will happen? At least you'll get a ticket. Maybe you'll have an accident. You have to use your brain and think. What's testable evidence? And I'm going to try to share that with you right now. A lot of the people who don't believe, especially those who try to teach the theory of this evolution, will always come up to this point and say that if I don't see it, if I don't hear it, if I don't smell it, if I don't taste it, if I don't feel it, if I can't imagine it, it doesn't exist. It doesn't follow the laws of testable evidence of science. But yet I ask you a question. Aren't there things that pass by us every day that we can't see? Aren't there things that you cannot see? Or can you see everything? Of course not. You can't see because you don't have telescope vision. You don't have microscope vision. You're just looking at what you're used to looking at. But between you and I right now, there's a lot of air that's full of a lot of things that you can't see it and I can't see it. But it's there. Yes or no? Yeah. And what about sounds? You say, oh, what do you mean? How about animals? Don't dogs have a hearing range better than humans? Dogs hear things we don't hear. Isn't that true? Of course, sometimes we hear dogs all night long too, but that's a different story. I'm just saying, think. Use your brain. There are things out there that our senses don't perceive, but it doesn't mean they don't exist. Isn't that true? And it's kind of foolish when you consider that somebody would sit on a railroad track and say there's no train. And you say, man, there's a train coming. Do you see the track? He said, I never saw a track before. I'm going to stay right here. It's a nice place for me to camp. You say, this is a railroad track. You see those two rails? He said, those are handrails for midgets. You say, no, they're not. Those are the rails for the track. The wheels of the train are going to go. He said, what wheels? What are you talking about? This is a railroad track. Do you see the cross ties? Do you see these boards? A train is coming. He said, I don't see it. Therefore, there's no train. You say, listen, there's a curve right up there on the other side of that hill. In a few minutes, at 12 o'clock, the train always comes from there. You're going to hear it. You're going to hear it. And you're going to feel it. You're going to feel it. You're going to see it. You're going to see it. You understand me? He said, I don't believe you. Listen to me. Listen. You're going to feel it because the ground is going to rumble. Then you're going to hear it because it's going to go woo-woo like that. And then you're going to see a big yellow light right on the front of it. And then if you don't get off this track, you're going to really feel it. And sure enough, the ground begins to rumble like that. You tell him you feel that? He said it's an earthquake. You say, man. Then, woo-woo. Say, you hear it? He said, that's an owl. Look, turn around and look. Do you see it? He said, I'm not going to fool you anymore. I'm just going to stand right here. Just turn around, look. It's right there. He said, I don't believe you. And besides, he said, I have my own religion. In my religion, if I don't hear it, and I don't see it, and I don't feel it, and I don't smell it, if I just tune it out, it's not there. I just, whoop, and it's gone. Well, you better get off the railroad track because he's fixing to whoop and be gone. So we use our common sense and we realize that there is proof that there's a God. Who is the God? Let's use some real testable evidence. The one who created us is smarter than us. Acknowledge that immediately, because we cannot create life and He can. He's more compassionate than us. That we don't even have to get into. But for sure, He has the design of the whole universe, and we can't even design one molecule. We cannot create a single protein of life. Not even a single molecule of protein can be created by our scientists in their laboratories. They can't. The random chance of it coming together boggles your mind. You can't even estimate. There's not a computer big enough to figure out what the random chance is for accidentally bringing the elements together to create one protein. Think about that. Now I'm going to mention a couple of other points, and then I want to go to the main point. Suppose that you took a tomato seed and cut it open and looked inside. Suppose you took an acorn from a big tree and cut it open and looked inside. Do you see little plants, little trees in there? Of course not. What's in there? Nothing. You open it up and there's nothing in it. But you put it in the ground and you cover it up and you get it wet. What will happen? Most likely it will grow. Yes? And by the way, you don't have to worry about whether or not you put it upside down or right side up. You say, I don't want my tree to grow with the roots coming up, you know, and the plant going down, so I have to see which way is up. You're laughing. I'm telling you, this is common sense. Something is... What, has that got a computer in it? Has it got a compass in it? How do plants know how to get out of the ground? What makes them grow? Think about it. Think about it. And why, when we have so much proof, would some people still deny? So much proof, and they still deny it. Who is this Creator? Well, for sure, one of the things that we can begin to think about is, this must be some kind of test that we're in. Why? Well, we've just figured out there's a Creator, but we can't see Him. We can't hear Him. We can't smell Him or taste Him or feel Him. So He must be hiding. He must be hiding from us. But why? Why? And Islam gives us the answer to that right away. Because this creation is a place for us to go through a test to see if we'll obey Him or obey our own desires. But for those who really believe in Him, who want to be close to Him, who would like to be in the next life with Him, then they will submit to Him on His terms. And you say, how do you draw that kind of a conclusion? You kind of jump the gun here. We're out here in the pasture playing with seeds, and the next thing I know, you're preaching a message to me. Well, I want you to think about this. You are intelligent. You were smart enough to get here all by yourself. You're smart enough to come in and sit down and listen, and you figured out most of what I said so far, even though it is in Texas English. Figure this. Nobody in this room has seen God. Never. Didn't hear Him. Didn't smell Him. Didn't taste Him. Didn't feel Him. Oh, you might have good feelings about God, and I do too. But you didn't reach out here and grab anything. So therefore, God is in the unseen, or in Arabic, al-ghayb. That's where He is. Why? Why? And if He wants us to know, obviously He could let us know, couldn't He? Because He created us. It's easy for Him. Why didn't He let us know? And if He's going to let us know, how will He do it? Well, what He has done is to send people from amongst ourselves to us, called prophets. And these people have impeccable character. They're the very best of the very best of us. And they come to us, and they warn us, and they deliver the message. Many, many hundreds of them, thousands, over 124,000 messengers and prophets have come to warn human beings. 25 of them we know by name. Many are mentioned in the Old Testament for the Jewish. A few more are mentioned in the New Testament for the Christian. Yahya, the prophet, John the Baptist, Jesus, peace and blessing be upon Him, mentioned very clearly. And then, in the last and final revelation, the Quran, we find their names again mentioned there, along with Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him. And all of them carried the same message. It wasn't different. From the time of Adam until the time of right now, there's a God. He wants something from you. What does He want? If you read the Old Testament in the book of Exodus, if you read the Old Testament in the book of Leviticus, if you read the New Testament in the book of Mark, or if you read the Quran in Surah Ikhlas, and if you read the Quran, especially in chapter 51, verse 58, he says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونِ. And the meaning of it is, I only created you guys to worship me alone, without any partners. That's the message that came in all of the books that I mentioned to you. What's the first commandment for the Christian? Do we have any Christians with us tonight? Raise your hand. Any Christians? Okay. Did you ever read the Bible? It's a nice book. Did you see what the Ten Commandments said? Thou shalt have no other gods beside me. I'm the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. And beside me there is no other God. Thou shalt have no other gods beside me. Is that the first commandment? Yes. It's in Exodus and in Leviticus. Check it out. It also says the same thing in the book of Mark. What's the great commandment? The great commandment is to know the Lord your God is one Lord, one God. And you have to love Him with all your heart and all your might and all your soul. How many? One. And what does He say in the Quran? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. I seek refuge with Allah from the cursed devil. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. With the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ. Say He is Allah the unique, the one who eternally takes care of all the creation, but He doesn't need anything from them. Samad. He's not the father of anything in His creation, and He's not the son of anything in His creation. He's not even like anything in His creation, because He's Allah, the unique.